Hi everyone, how are you? This is Felipe, and this week you can see that I'm dressed in my Star Trek Next Generation uniform. That can only mean one thing. I'm a big, like a huge Star Trek fan. Funny enough, a lot of people think that because someone loves science and technology, then automatically they believe in evolution. That is definitely not so. My life has always been centered around science and technology. That's what I studied in high school. I did all the sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, and of course math. And in college, my first college stint was done in the island of Jamaica where I was born, and I studied electronics at the University of Technology. And then after I moved to the States, I studied at ITT Tech. I studied computer network engineering. So I've always been a lover of science, but I've never really accepted the evolution as it is taught. And in this video, I'm going to delve into the reason why. Because a lot of things are thrown around that if you believe in science and technology, then automatically you believe in evolution. And that is not true. I know a lot more scientists and persons who work in a scientific field who do not believe in evolution. They believe in some sort of creation by an intelligent being, whatever you might want to call him. So in this video, primarily I'm going to focus on what I believe as a professional. By trade, I'm a network and slash audio video engineer, and I'm going to look at how technology, primarily computer technology, how it has helped me to understand that evolution did not cause all the things around us to come about. So let's delve into that, and we're going to start by looking at a typical computer. Now, you might say, hey, I don't know anything about computers, so you're going to lose me. Well, you don't have to know a lot about computers, because the fact is, the fact that you're watching this video right now means that you at least have a computer. Whether it's a desktop computer, a laptop, a tablet, or a telephone, it's a computer. All these devices have the same basic components. Obviously, if you're using a telephone, then the components are much, much smaller and squeezed into a much smaller package. But all computing devices, telephones, tablets, desktop computer, laptop, they all have the very same components, but scaled to different levels. So here we have a desktop computer. A is the processor fan, but below that is a processor, what we call the CPU, Central Processing Unit. And every computing device needs a processor. Without a processor, it doesn't work. It needs a processor to get things going. B is the memory, or the RAM. And this is what we call volatile memory or short-term memory. So anything you're working on at the time is in volatile memory or short-term memory. C is your video card. That's what you would connect your monitor to so that you can actually see what you're doing. So that would be your monitor or your screen connecting to the graphics card, which is C. E covers several chips on the motherboard, including the BIOS. And later on we'll discuss what the BIOS is, but those chips are on the main board. And all these components are placed on the main board. And the main board is what links all these different devices together. D is our power supply. You can see the power cord going to it through the back, and it sends power to the different boards and components in the system. F is your hard drive or your long-term memory. I'm sure many of you have experienced a hard drive crash at some point or the other, or you have upgraded your hard drive to a bigger hard drive. So that's long-term memory. So there we have it. So this is what we call our BIOS screen. Now, BIOS is an acronym. It actually means Basic Input Output System. So when you put all these components together and you turn your computer on, the BIOS, which is a chip on your main board, it has some basic instructions that will allow the components to talk to each other. And in talking to each other, you can see what's working, if the fans are working fine, if your main board can see your hard drive, if the memory is being displayed correctly. Just some basic things, just to make sure that everything is up and running. And of course, with the BIOS, you're limited as to what you can do with a computer. Now, computers, the components in a computer, the memory, the video card, the hard drive, they talk to each other using a binary system. That's computer language at its lowest level, a binary system. It's a system of ones and zeros. 1 meaning the presence of a voltage, 0 meaning no voltage. So the sequence and combination of ones and zeros is actually how you code information and allow components to speak to each other. That's a very basic level of how computer components communicate with each other. Now, as you can see on this screen, this is basically a screenshot of what my network at home. It's an ARP. Now, I've purposely blocked out some information obviously for privacy reasons. I can't have people finding out what my network configuration looks like. Now, if you notice in the second column, it says physical address, and it's also called a MAC address. So every computer, the network card where you plug the cable in, or you could be using a Wi-Fi card, which is built into your device, be it a cell phone or a tablet. Every Wi-Fi or network card has what we call a physical or a MAC address. And that physical address or MAC address identifies your computer on a network. So if you just put your components in your motherboard, turn it on and plug a network cable in, you can't do much, but the network card is going to advertise itself. Hi, how are you? I'm so and so. So it says, basically saying, this is my physical address or my MAC address, and other computers on the network will be able to see it. So that's a basic communication. So the other devices will know, hey, there's another device on the network. Beyond that, they don't know anything else, because the BIOS can do very limited communication with other devices on the network. Now, if you want to do more advanced functions like browse the internet and so on, then you would install an operating system. Android is one of them. Or some people like using Apple. Some people like using Linux. And Unix, which is very popular in the business or the server or the mainframe network. Unix is very popular, especially in an industrial application. And then, of course, Windows, the operating system of choice for most people on this planet. Now, for the purpose of this discussion, let's assume that we're installing Windows, the Windows operating system, on our computer that we just built in the first slide. So you could compare an operating system to a language, because a language allows you to communicate and do more advanced communication. So I hope I'm making sense so far. Before you install Windows, your computer can only do basic things such as identify itself on a network. Hey, here's my network card. But beyond that, it can't do anything else. And that's why we need to install an operating system such as Windows. So looking at the parts of a computer, we can now compare it to the human body. Here's our brain. So what would we compare the brain to? Well, the brain could be compared to the hard drive, long-term memory, right? Most of the brain, that is, long-term memory. And then RAM, or the RAM chips that we saw on the motherboard, they could be compared to short-term memory, things that you're just doing right now. Whatever you're doing right now, a conversation you're having, that's in short-term memory, because as soon as you're done talking, then it's gone. Of course, you could commit that information to long-term memory, or you could choose to discard it. And of course, that would be compared to your hard drive. Then what about your heart? Your heart could be compared to the CPU. because, as we said before, without that CPU going, the computer is not going to work. If you don't have a heart, you're not going to live. Whether it's a heart made of flesh or it's an artificial mechanical heart that is pumping blood, everyone needs something to pump blood around the body. And that's where the heart comes in, and we compare it to the CPU. And of course, your eyes could be compared to a webcam, just like the webcam I'm using right now to record this video. And that gets information into the computer. The arms, the legs, they could be compared to peripheral items that you connect to a computer. Keyboard, mouse, anything that would allow the computer to interact with its environment, detect information, manipulate stuff, a printer, stuff like that. Those could be compared to the extremities in a human body. So, we're beginning to see the relationship between a computer and the human body, the similarities. Now, here we have a picture of two different persons from two different racial groups and obviously language also. When these persons meet for the first time, they don't speak a common language. But there's a basic information inside their brain that allows them to recognize that, hey, that's another human being. Just like a computer without Windows installed can only do a limited set of functions, like recognize, hey, I'm on a network, I can see other computers, I can see other MAC addresses. Beyond that, it doesn't know anything else, but it can do the basics. In a similar vein, two human beings who don't speak the same language, they know that the other person exists. And they can probably do certain rudimentary things, like if one of them wanted to say, I'm hungry, they could probably touch their stomach or point to their mouth. Or if they wanted to say, hey, I'd like to sleep, they could probably go, But it's very rudimentary communication, designed to communicate only certain basic thoughts. So in order to communicate at a higher level, they would need to have a language in common. And we can compare that, as we mentioned earlier, to installing, let's say, Microsoft Windows on the computer. Because with an operating system, then you can communicate at a higher level, browse the internet, install programs, graphic programs, video editing programs like the video I'm using to record this right now. So we begin to see the similarities coming out. Now, let's look at human reproduction. And this is going to help us to understand even more the analogy that I've made with computers. We know that in humans, like all mammals, human males produce sperm cells. And the human females, just like other female mammals, produce an ovum, which is released by the ovary, usually one every month. And what happens is that when a male and a female mammal have that relationship, that sexual relationship, what happens is that the sperm cell will seek out the ovum with one goal in mind: to fertilize. And in fertilizing, DNA information from the sperm cell is combined with DNA information from the ovum, and then they combine to form a unique DNA code that is made of 50% from the male, 50% from the female. They combine and they create a totally different DNA code. We're going to look a bit deeper at this DNA that we have on the screen for one specific reason. We want to make a comparison with computer language. Remember, we spoke about binary, ones and zeros. That's the lowest communication level at which computers interact. The main board in the computer interacts with the different parts that you plug into it. Unlike the binary communication, which is made up of ones and zeros, DNA is a bit more complex. So in a binary system, you have two variables. It's either a 1 or it's a 0. Here in DNA, we have 4 variables, and those 4 variables can be combined in many different ways in a chain, and that's what you would call the code. So I don't want to make this a class about DNA, which is just another topic altogether. I want to keep this very simple. So we're just going to bear in mind that there are 4 different options as opposed to the 2 in binary, and there are different ways of combining those 4 different options. And that is what gives you your genetic code. So what happens when a male sperm cell fertilizes a female ovum? As we mentioned before, it creates a totally unique DNA code that is made up of 50% dad and 50% mom. Within a few hours of that sperm cell fertilizing the ovum, those cells, that one cell I should say, begins to multiply at an amazing rate very quickly. Within a few days, billions of cells have already come from that one cell, because for those of you who studied biology or science, just basic science in elementary school or primary school, cells divide, cells multiply by splitting in 2. So 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 become 8, and so on, and they increase exponentially. So within a very short time, those cells begin to multiply. But at that stage, they're stem cells. Now, what do we mean by stem cells? Stem cells are not clearly defined as to what role they're going to play. They're just cells. Stem cells, to be specific. And the cells just keep multiplying, 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 multiplying. There comes a point when, after multiplying, groups of cells begin to take on specific roles. Some cells begin to form bones. Some cells begin to form the heart. Some cells begin to form the lungs. Other cells begin to create a communication system, the nervous system. Other cells begin to form the blood vessels. Other cells begin to form blood. Usually, for that to happen, the DNA must contain specific instructions that will tell a group of cells at a certain point in time, look, you need to form bone. You need to form the heart. You need to interconnect. The nervous system needs to form. Neurons or brain cells need to form. And each organ in its correct place. A skull needs to form around that brain and protect it. And at different stages of the pregnancy, those cells need to carry out their different tasks. I can tell you, as someone who programs systems, automated systems, it's not an easy task to program a home to be automated. There's a lot of logic that goes into programming. Certain things have to happen at just the right time. Certain activities will depend on others and will need to compare and say, okay, do I turn on the light or do I not turn on the light? Under which circumstances do I not turn on the light? What if it's raining? What if it's a Sunday? What if it's during the day but it's overcast and the place is dark? So there are so many variables, so many factors to take into consideration that doing something as complex as a human body is just amazing. Let me give you an idea of what programming is at a simple level. The Windows operating system, if your hard drive crashes and whoever you buy your computer from, they send you a brand new hard drive and you take the defective hard drive out, you put the new hard drive in, and you have to reinstall Windows. The Windows operating system that fits on your DVD, to build that operating system requires groups of programmers. Yes, different teams, probably thousands of Microsoft employees working probably in different offices, but all with one specific goal in mind, to build an operating system. So different teams will work on different modules. And we're talking about millions and millions of lines of code that have to be written. Then it has to be debugged. And basically debugging is just testing if the code works. Does it generate any errors? Does it do anything that is not desired? And it takes years, most times, for an operating system to be developed, debugged, and tested to work correctly. That's just a simple operating system. Here we have a brand new human being who has come from a single cell, first of all, two cells, one from each parent, combining to form a brand new cell. This cell now divides millions and millions of times, and at a certain point when all you have is a ball of cells, those cells begin to take on different roles. There has to be a very complex code within the DNA to say, hey, you guys need to form the heart, you guys need to form the brain, and it has to happen in the right sequence to create a human body. It's absolutely amazing. And if something as simple as a computer needing an operating system requires a designer and creator, several engineers, hundreds of engineers perhaps, working together to put this thing together, when we think about something more complex like the human body, then we realize there has to be a creator. So the cells multiply, they begin to take on certain roles, and then 9 months later we have this, a brand new human being. And to think that these beautiful creatures came from one cell that started multiplying and then started taking form. It's absolutely amazing. It's difficult, impossible for me at this point in time to believe in evolution, because if the simple things, if the very complex programming tasks that I have to do require so much thought and design and planning, something as complex as producing another human being, I'm sure it requires a lot more planning, a lot more design, a very high level of programming. There has to be an intelligent personality behind all of this. It's interesting to note that in order for a computer to be built and to work, it must be put together in the correct environment. Parts have to be designed and built a certain way. A lot of parts have to be built in a clean room that has a very low count of dust and particles. Yes, the chips have to be produced in a very clean room, and that's why when you see pictures of scientists or engineers working in a plant that produces microchips, they're covered in white. They're covered in a suit that will prevent even cells, body cells, small as they are, just falling from the body, falling into that chip. It will ruin the chip. So they have to be in a very clean room. The computer parts have to be built in a very specific environment. Here we have the egg sac of a shark, and this egg sac is designed to sustain that embryo in salt water until that baby shark comes out. The eggs of this bird, once the egg is fertilized by the male, the protein and the carbohydrate and all the other nutrients or substances inside that egg, they will begin to change over a period of time. And then after that specific time, a chick will emerge. From organic material, life will take shape. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Think about this, people. From organic material, if that egg isn't fertilized, the protein, the carbohydrates, everything inside that will begin to rot and go bad. But another organic piece of material, a cell, just combining with that material, that genetic material, and life is produced. So there's something inside DNA, a specific genetic code that allows all of those protein, carbohydrates to come together in a certain way that will produce life. And that is what is so amazing about reproduction. So just like all the other forms of life that we looked at prior to this, a human fetus requires a right environment, the correct environment, to develop from an embryo into a mini human being. If the womb is breached, then more than likely that fetus is going to die. Premature births are usually not successful before a certain point in time. And even then, the premature child is put in an incubator and treated delicately until the body is at a stage where it can operate on its own. So all of this requires some advanced level of programming at the DNA level, knowing what environment to expect, knowing how to pull nutrients through the umbilical cord and continue growing. It's just a lot of information to happen by chance. Evolution just doesn't make sense. If we all came from a common ancestor, as the evolutionists claim, then it means a cow and a gorilla should be able to have an offspring, right? Well, it doesn't happen. And this reminds me of a very interesting text in the Bible book of Genesis that says each form of life would reproduce according to its own kind. So can a lion and a tiger have an offspring? Of course they can, because they're from the same class of species. They're from the cat family. They're large cats. And naturally, a lion would not, seek out a tiger or a tigress. But artificially, their reproductive cells have been combined, and I'll just allow you to look up that on your own on Wikipedia or wherever you choose to find out what the combination of a lion and a lioness would be, or what the combination of a lioness and a tiger would be. They have different names depending on which one is male and which one is female. So scientists have tried to combine different species like a cow and a gorilla, and when they tried that, the sperm cell just wasn't attracted to the ovum of a different species. When a human sperm cell, for example, enters the uterus of a human female, it's as if the sperm cell knows exactly what it's looking for, and it will search it out and it will find that ovum and it will implant itself. But when scientists put a human sperm cell or a sperm cell from another mammal inside the uterus or in a petri dish with the ovum from another mammal of a different species, it's like it doesn't even know it's there. So I guess we could say it's pre-programmed to look for a specific ovum. And this again tells us that there has to be some programming involved. Because if we all descended from a common ancestor and we were all related, then we would have all these hybrids, but that's not happening. So again, it shows design. So here's an industrial embroidery machine. If you take a look, you'll see that there's a computer screen on this embroidery machine, and contained within it is a computer. So for the sake of this video, let's say that we're doing a cap that says Argentina or Brazil or Portugal, World Cup winner 2018. But obviously we can't start doing the embroidery on the caps until we know who the winners are. Let's say that the instructions is stored on a CD, but we're not sure who the winner is yet. So you create a file on the CD, and the only thing you need to modify on the file is who the winner is. Now let's say the final is this Sunday, and you have a factory deep in some other country where the raw materials for the caps are nearby, and labor is cheap there, so you have the factory there. And as soon as you know who the winner is, your boss wants production to start on those embroidered caps. World Cup winners 2018, whatever country. So the information is on a CD, and you jump into a small airplane, and you're flying off to this factory far away. maybe another part of the country or in a different country. And your bag that contains that CD or DVD is in a compartment below the plane. Now something happens, the luggage compartment on the plane blows open in mid-flight and your bag falls out of the airplane, and it falls into a region where a group of indigenous people live. Now the only catch is the government has forbidden contact with this group of indigenous people. Why? Because they have proven to be hostile. Reason number one. The second reason is that because they have not had any contact with modern society, they have not been exposed to the diseases that we have been exposed to, and the authorities fear that if we have contact with them, then we could expose them to viruses to which they have no immunity, and we could wipe them out. So because of the hostility and the fear of contamination, the government just prohibits interacting with them. Now, these people are still in the Stone Age, and this bag falls out of the sky. So one of the persons from this indigenous tribe, they say, "Oh, the God of the sun has sent us a gift from the heavens." And they find the DVD and they say, "Wow, that's a nice mirror." And they hang it up and they use it as a mirror. They have no idea what's on the DVD. No clue. Another person from the tribe says, "No, the God of the sky has sent us something for cutting food." And they use that very thin CD or DVD to slice food. Another person says, "Oh, the God of the sky has sent us a device to send a signal over long distances because we can reflect the light from the sun." So we have three different people, and they have come to the conclusion that the God of the sky has sent them this wonderful device for doing three different things. Another person from the tribe says, "You know what? You're all idiots. This device has information that, we haven't figured out how to use yet. So stop talking nonsense and let's just continue improving as a society, see if we can figure out what is actually happening." Now, why am I mentioning this? Because I need to make the comparison between the situation, the illustration I just gave, and DNA. We don't really understand how DNA works. We know how to compare DNA. We know it's there. We know how to compare it. For the past 20 or 30 years, we have been using it to help in solving crime. We know that each person's DNA is unique, except in the case of identical twins. They have the same exact DNA. But our knowledge of DNA is very limited. We don't know how to modify DNA to change the color of someone's hair, skin, color of their eyes. We don't even know what it is exactly that gives a person a certain skin color. So the way all that information is coded in DNA, we really don't know how it's done. We know DNA controls it, but we really don't know how it's done. So, going back to the indigenous tribe, a lot of people seeing God's creation draw a lot of conclusions. And this can be a turnoff for people who are less emotional and more logically minded. But the fact that a lot of people are drawing wrong conclusions about God because of their ignorance, they're not delving deeper or rushing to draw conclusions, doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. The DNA in the illustration, the CD or DVD falling out of the sky, is a clear indication that some intelligent being is behind the DVD. The people who find it, they have no idea. They have not reached that level of intellectual development. But when all is said and done, regardless of whatever conclusions they might draw, the God of the sky has sent us a mirror, a signaling device, a slicer for food, they're wrong in their assumptions. But what doesn't change is the fact that it's an intelligent being who made that DVD. And the same thing applies to DNA. A lot of people have drawn a lot of wrong conclusions, and they have done a lot of bad things in God's name, but that's irrelevant. Irrelevant in the sense that it doesn't change who God is, or the fact that He has designed DNA and all these other things to work in this way. This planet, a very complex ball sitting in an otherwise hostile universe. Outside of this planet, there are a lot of things that can and will kill us if we're not properly protected. Yet we have this beautiful blue ball sitting in space, sustaining life, delicate life. In such a hostile environment, why do you have this beautiful ball sustaining such delicate life with all the danger that is out there? How did this come about? And logic will lead us in only one direction. That's it. That's all I'm going to say on this matter. Do you have any comments, questions? Feel free to comment below and subscribe. Subscribe because I'm going to be talking about something closely related to this in another video. Something very closely related to planet Earth and space travel, which is something I really like as a Star Trek fan. So please subscribe, tune in. Feel free to visit my website, check out some of my books. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you. But keep it clean, please. No foul language, no disrespectful speech. I will delete your comment if it uses curse words or anything that's not appropriate. Let's keep the conversation logical and clean, okay? Simpson out.